Welcome to Mindfulness Manufacturing. My name is Trevor Blondeel. Spending 25 years in manufacturing, I discovered the real impact we have on turnover, communication, and the ability to manage change is how we show up. That's the essence of emotional intelligence. In each episode, we bring a guest or message to expand your skills, engage your people, and grow your organization. So let's jump in. In manufacturing, we're talking on this podcast about having deeper conversations, being more mindful. And one of the analogies I like to have is, when you walk into a problem, there's some smoke and you can put some gasoline on it and create a fire, or you can bring some water and take that conversation down so we can focus on the problem. I know when I started running manufacturing plants, I didn't really know how to handle some of these intense conversations. And I got nervous sometimes that it was going to get physical. And I just didn't have that knowledge. I really learned from other people that I worked with that helped me be better at de-escalating conversations. But I have a friend that's an expert in de-escalating hot conversations. Carol Cambridge, welcome to the show. We were born just miles from each other in Southern Ontario.
We were. Thank you so much for having me, Trevor. I appreciate it.
So a little bit about Carol. She, as early age of 7, she found herself standing up for those who couldn't speak for themselves, those who were afraid, and those who had been abused. She stood up to bullies in the playground, on the police department, and in later years, bullies who threaten and intimidate others in manufacturing and corporations across North America. She's a founder of the Stay Safe Project, is the authority on workplace violence, active shooter, and workplace conflict. Carol, from the age of 7 to here, and now for so many years, you've been helping organizations and manufacturing plants put more water on the fire.
Absolutely. They tend to hire me to come in and bring the water and really teach them, how to navigate really navigate their fear. I always tell people that I teach people how to navigate fear and use their critical thinking skills to guide them through any kind of an emergency or crisis, lacking more and more in manufacturing and other services. We have a lot of leaders and supervisors, managers that just don't know or understand critical thinking.
Yeah, so that's for you what it comes down to. It's the critical thinking in that heated situation.
It does. And, most of the time when I get called in to a manufacturer or any kind of a company, there's already been a problem. There's already been an issue. They're calling me because either they know they have to do something, maybe it's their insurance company has said, hey, you have no choice. You've got to bring somebody in. You have to be able to show. A lot of times there's then an OSHA investigation, especially if someone has gotten hurt. And so they have to show what steps they're taking to make improvements around this area. And so I often find that leaders in manufacturing, they do the best they can, but this isn't their skill set.
Mm-hmm.
They've not been trained to do this. We promote a lot of people that really don't necessarily have that kind of a skill set. They don't know because most of us learned our de-escalation skills either at home
Mm-hmm.
through our parents, might have been good, might not have been good at all, maybe a little bit at school. But most people who are coming into the workforce these days, they have a complete lack of understanding about de-escalation. And the other thing that they're not aware of, or maybe they're afraid to report it, is bad behavior. We don't expect it. And so when we see
Mm-hmm.
it, we're like, I don't know. Like, I'll give you an example. I had a supervisor in a manufacturing company, and he did not want to report this, but he was getting threats from an employee. And he had had several threats. When he finally got this last one, he decided to share it with a coworker. The coworker then called HR, HR called, and I chatted with him. But here's how the threat went. He said, your kids get off school, what, about 3 o'clock? They get on that school bus and they're home by what, 3:30? Nice, new, beautiful house, and those kids are there all by themselves, huh? Till you or your wife get home from work.
Wow.
Hate to see anything happen to them. Because you know, it'd take a long time for the fire department to get there. He said it
Ah.
directly. And so, he thought about it. He went home, he told his wife about it. His wife flipped out. She's
Oh
like, no,
yeah.
you need to tell somebody. And he's like, no, I know who it is. He's not going to do anything. He's a bully. He's got a big mouth. He's not going to do anything. Well, the first thing I asked is, do you have a workplace violence policy? Because this kind of a threat could violate that policy. And so we went from there. But he was really reluctant to report it. And I find that a lot. Supervisors and managers are kind of in a tough position because, especially if they're looking for a promotion, they want to handle it on their own. They don't want a supervisor or anybody in HR or anybody above them. They don't want their operations manager looking at them and saying, geez, that was a personality conflict. He should have handled that. He should have known how. So they might get passed over for the next promotion. So they kind of keep quiet about it.
And I find that, my kids are like 26 and 24, and they have a different mindset around like being more open about that, reporting that. Where,
Mhm.
I learn a bit because I'm kind of like, yeah, I don't know why I wouldn't bring that up or I wouldn't report that. And then I got to kind of think back to how I was brought up and ingrained. And it was more of like, yeah, we don't want to make a big deal, like just kind of keep it quiet. And you're trying to help us retrain our brains that no, like take the early warning signs and talk about them.
Yeah. And people just don't get it. I mean, employees often they don't report things. So I get called in after an incident. It could be a forklift has run over somebody, on purpose, not an accident,
Mhm.
but they
An
on
accent.
purpose use the forklift as a weapon. Or, there's been a suicide or, something violent has happened and we'll go in, I'll talk to people. And, I find anywhere from maybe 5 to a dozen people who saw signs beforehand, but none of them reported it. And the thing is, I might see something on its own. That's kind of out of character. Maybe I should, maybe I shouldn't report it. Oh, well, I'll let it go because I haven't seen anything else. The problem is that 3 or 4 coworkers are saying the same thing. So if those 5 or 6 reported that behavior to their environmental health and safety person or to HR, that person could go, okay, now we've got a problem because I've got 5 or 6 people saying that they've seen signs. So there are signs and behaviors that are predictive of violence, but there's no particular order. There's no magic number to look at. And some of the signs that are predictive of violence are also the same signs that are predictive of mental illness. So a lot of people just don't want to get involved. They also think, geez, I live in a small town. My kids go to
Mm.
school with their kids. Oh, if I say something and he gets fired, he loses his job. You know, I sit on the PTA with, his wife, and, we start
Stories.
thinking through all these stories and excuses about why we shouldn't. And I think there's also that mentality that probably you and I both grew up with about being a tattletale or a snitch.
Yeah.
Don't
Yeah.
tell anybody, don't tell on your
Yeah.
friend. And that's one of the biggest things I think that I do when I go into companies is really try to change that mindset, reframe the difference between tattling and reporting. Because reporting is something that when you see something that makes you uncomfortable or that feels threatening in any way, that's reporting. That's not tattling. Tattling is, oh, this guy took too many smoke breaks, or
Yeah.
this person was 5 minutes late, or then they were 10 minutes late on this. That's tattling. Tattling is when it's putting somebody else down and making yourself look better.
Yeah.
But reporting is anything that makes you feel leery, uncomfortable. I mean, I even had a manufacturer who hired a level 3 sex offender. And, they had company picnics and parties and this kind of thing.
Hmm.
And the employees came to me while I was doing the training and said, hey, look, you know, We feel so uncomfortable that 50% of the people aren't even showing up for the company picnic
Mm,
because we're panicked. We don't want a level 3 sex offender at our company picnic around
yeah,
our kids.
yeah,
That just makes it uncomfortable. So there's a ton of reasons that people don't report.
yeah. And I like the whole framing of the difference with for reporting and tattling. Like, and just having that conversation and just having examples of, this is something that was said that I'm not comfortable with. And and
Exactly.
and then just talking to peers, right? Of like, hey, this
Mhm.
is am I reading into this? But then I guess you got to be careful talking to peers, because if you're talking, they might just say,
That's just Joe.
that's so. Let me ask you this: if someone says, hey, you got to be careful working for Trevor, you could end up being in the bottom of a river if you don't produce results. So this was an actual comment that was said to someone, and they asked me about it, and I'm like, so how should you respond to something like that?
Yeah, definitely you would want to report that. Most definitely. And because these kinds of reports, that kind of behavior is devious. It's not a direct threat. So, a direct threat is where I'm going to kill you. That's a
Yeah.
direct threat.
Yeah.
Police can take action on a direct threat. These other innuendos and other types of threats are not direct. They can't take any action, but it goes to an indicator that there may be something else wrong with them. Now, it may just be that they're a bully and bullies love to throw, nasty comments around, but it could be more serious than that. And I will tell you, after I've gone in and somebody has been killed or somebody has been stabbed or there's been a suicide, like I said, in every single case, all kinds of people saw the signs, but they either didn't know what was expected of them in terms of
Hmm.
reporting and who they should report it to and how. I tell companies I
Mm.
hate hotlines all the time.
Okay.
And they say, why? We think it's good. Somebody can have this anonymous tip line or hotline and they can call it in. And I say to them, how often do you check your tip line? Normally they'll say once a week. And I'll say, well, weren't you just on vacation last week? Yes. Who checked it while you were away? Oh,
Mm.
nobody. So it's actually been 2 weeks. So if there was a death threat or something really serious on that tip line, you not listening to that threat, how are you going to feel? Oh, didn't think of that.
Mm.
And so when I say how to report, a lot of people just don't know what is expected of them.
So
Is it
is it best to go to like your boss? I guess it depends on, like, if I'm a manufacturing leader, I'm driving in right now and
yeah,
I've got something in my mind that Carol's got me thinking. Maybe I should think about this response that I heard.
yeah.
Do we go to our leader first, HR? Where do you find manufacturing people are going to their first resource?
It probably should be to their immediate supervisor, and
Yeah.
it puts the liability and the onus on that supervisor. And so when I'm doing supervisory and management training, I always say, don't get caught up in this. Don't get caught in a place where you heard this from your employee, but you made a judgment call that this wasn't important enough, or that was just Fred, or that was just Sally that said that. You have to take it up the chain. I think when it's more serious, supervisors know what to do. It's when it's that ambivalent kind of a comment or threat, they don't know. So I had a potential client call me. They weren't on my payroll. I wasn't on their payroll because I should, but they said, we're all gathering here. We're just not sure how to handle this. We had our night shift leaving, day shifts coming on. And a couple of the replacements just said to these two ladies, so how was your night? And the one lady said, well, let's put it this way. If I had a gun, there'd be a lot less employees working right now.
Oh.
And the gal that was with her said, well, you don't have any guns, but I do. If you need one. And the person
Ah.
looked at her and said, well, you never know. I might take you up on that. And then they walk off. So it was fellow employees of the day shift that they said this to. They were smart enough that they went directly to their supervisor, and their supervisor went directly to HR. And so they were trying to figure out how to handle it. And I remember this case so well because they had been calling me. I was on an airplane. I was kind of texting them back and I'm talking to them as I'm in the back seat of an Uber trying to get to the client where I was going to be speaking. Their biggest concern was that this person had taken some time off. They were worried about HIPAA regulations because she had had some mental illness issues in the
Mhm.
past. And so they were leery of taking action. I said, well, that would make me want to take action a little bit more. While they couldn't share all of that information with me, they didn't feel comfortable doing that. I'm like, okay, but you need to take a serious look at that because that ups the risk. And I think that's the point. All of this information gets told to HR, environmental health and safety. I suggest they create a team, actually. It can be a workplace violence team, it can be a crisis management team. There's so many different names for having a team like this, but you want different levels involved that can immediately jump on something like this and handle it. It shouldn't be an HR problem alone. It,
No.
it kind of takes a team to work through these
Yeah.
issues.
Yeah. And I think just right now, like my brain's being rewired just having this conversation with you, right? Because I'm thinking I had to think about the bottom of the river thing
Yeah,
conversation, and I shouldn't have.
yeah.
I shouldn't have.
Did
I
you end
should
up
like,
reporting?
yeah. So that did get reported.
Okay.
Uh, but where I'm disappointed in myself, Carol, is that it wasn't instant for me, right? So it was like, well, people say it's a saying, right? Like it's not really mean anything. That's my Trevor first hardwire, and I have to think deeper and think, well, hold on a minute. Like, what if that is an early warning sign? And you know what? It's probably just not a good phrase to use in manufacturing, like or any environment. So like that's a great example of the two employees just having a conversation there. That
And it's about being mindful, right? The way we thought 10 years ago or 15 years ago just doesn't happen anymore. We have to be really conscious about all of this kind of thing. And if it's investigated properly, that person isn't going to lose their job, over saying something like that about putting you at the bottom of the river, but they will learn a very valuable lesson.
yeah.
And
And like you said, the whole team will learn. Like I learned through it, right? Like it's like, okay, yeah, well that is an early warning sign. And then if how would I feel if that got dismissed and then something, and I guess that's what you're about, is that you can't stop the active shooter, but you can help create conversations now to prevent that from ever happening.
yeah, absolutely. I have a lot of people who will say, Carol, should we even have you into our manufacturing company to do this program on surviving an active shooter? Because if the shooter ended up being one of our employees, wouldn't he know all the secrets? He or she know all the secrets? Well, yes, they might, but it's also highly unlikely that it is going to be an employee that's going to do that. It's usually a domestic violence type situation,
Mm.
somebody coming in. It could be a former employee, ex-employee. Where do they come in? Well, a lot of manufacturers don't necessarily have air conditioning, especially in the summer in certain parts of the
Mhm.
country, right? So they leave their back doors open to get that little bit of
Oh,
air.
yeah.
Well, HR has a high risk termination the week before, they'd better put out a notification to everybody that, hey, we've just had a termination. There may have been some threats made to the company. We need you to be on a higher alert for the next few weeks and ensure that all of the doors remain closed. Some of them have key card access, some don't. It just depends, obviously, on the level of the manufacturing.
But you need to be upfront, and
Yeah.
you're going to make people feel safer by communicating that. But you must have been in situations where companies like, oh, we don't want to make people worry.
Oh, I get that. I get it less and less now. Uh,
Good.
I mean, 20 years ago, very much so. Certain parts of the country, I think I hear it a little bit more. There's still that, no, we want an open door policy. Nobody here would do that. And the thing
Yeah.
is that, people will say, well, we do great background checks. That's fantastic. But do you know how many 15 or 17-year employees that we've had to terminate because something has happened? It's usually something that's happened in their personal life, something very stressful that's pushed them over the edge. And, are they taking it out at home? Are they going to take it out at work? Yeah, because they don't leave
Mm.
that stuff at work. If they are stressed to the max, and then as a leader, as a supervisor, we tell them that something isn't working well, at work, their performance is a little lower or whatever the complaint might be, and they become explosive. It's because of everything that's happened before at home. It
Yeah.
isn't necessarily about what happened at work. So, these aggravations that just become very aggressive at work, we need to look at each one of them. And is this a one off or is this in a series? And almost every time
Ooh.
I go in and work, I'm looking for, has there been a series? Has there been a trigger? How long has this been going on? Because I will tell you, in almost every case that I have been involved in, the employee has been fantastic. Nothing written up in their file. They do their work, they come in,
Mm.
people like them. And at some point, things start to shift. Their behavior changes. Sometimes their how they present themselves. They'll come in untidy, unmanageable. They do one of two things. They either gain a lot of weight or they lose a whole lot of weight.
Mm.
The clothes don't fit properly anymore. Hygiene, they actually will become smelly. They don't take showers. There's signs of depression. It might be minor comments, not really threats, but minor comments that start to accelerate. They start having some faulty decision making, which of course is really dangerous in manufacturing because they're typically around, equipment that can be very, very dangerous. They sometimes will develop a disrespect for authority. Exactly.
Yeah. So yeah, it's interesting because what I'm writing my book about is having deeper conversations, not telling people what to do to get results. And
Mhm.
that is one of and I didn't think about it in a like how to prevent violence, but looking for changes in behavior is just such a clue, right? And the t-shirt I want to get is stay curious, right? If we just stay curious about others, then it's like, oh, that's interesting. I asked Carol to make sure she did the safety check and she snapped at me this morning. We can grit that right up front and say, Carol, you don't usually get that upset when I ask you about the safety chart. What's going on?
Yeah, and I love that. And one of the things that you and I are similar in that I ask people, because we make so many judgments. And so when I'm teaching a class or I'm doing a keynote, I ask people, it's about being curious. It's not about being judgmental.
Mhm.
Because it's those judgments that get in our way. And if we've known somebody for many years, we've worked at the same company, we do have a judgment, good or bad about them, but we have a judgment because we have past experience. So, can you leave that judgment aside, go in kind of a neutral way, and be curious? So, I love what you said. It makes a lot of sense, Trevor.
That part will be in my book.
All right.
I gotta leave the listeners with this last kind of question here. So if I'm in the situation, Carol, and someone's behavior is getting heated and heated, and I'm
Mhm.
starting to get stressed out, and I don't see a way out of this conversation. So you must get this in your keynotes question. So what is your advice to our listeners today? You're going in, you got to tell somebody some bad news. They have been acting a little bit off, and it's just a one-on-one conversation. How can I de-escalate that?
Well, number one, you need to probably take them off the line. you
That
know,
is a great start.
yeah, you don't want to be doing it around anything or anywhere where there can be tools or weapon or tools that could be used as weapons.
Yeah.
So you want to take them into a conference room, not even into your office, because your office is your office. It's puts
Mm,
them on guard. If you
yeah.
take them to a conference room, most conference rooms are glass. People can see in, people are walking
Mm,
by. You want that. You want that visibility because a lot of times they don't want to witness to whatever they're going to say or to do. The other thing is, I think we try to solve it too quickly.
mm,
And in de escalation, all you're attempting to do is de escalate the current situation. You can resolve it tomorrow. You can resolve it later in the day. You need to de escalate. If their behavior is such, you need them off the line. You send them home with pay, without pay, depending upon the behavior. But
yeah.
you send them home. They need a cooling off period. Some of us do better. And like, I'm one of those people, if there's a conflict, let's just deal with it right now. Could we? Could we just deal with it and get it over with? But if you're the person, Trevor, that needs to walk away from it for a while because your brain gets all fuzzy and you can't even think what to say next, and you might say the wrong thing, or you might swear, or you might do whatever poorly, you need the time away. I need to respect that. So if I'm the leader in the situation, I need to respect that the other person needs time. So, it could be something as simple as, why don't you head home? Pack it in. You're going to get paid for the rest of the day. I'll make sure your time card is stamped. I want to see you tomorrow morning, and you and I are going to talk through the situation and see if we can't come up with a resolution for this.
That's fantastic, Carol. I mean, what a great empowerment for our listeners, right? And whether you think you can afford that person or not, but the gold right there is, Trevor, stop trying to solve the problem when it's a good time for me, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't mean it's a good time for you. And I was just talking to a buddy of mine this week, a former guest, and I said, you're really good at just hearing me out, right? And not solving the problem. And it's just what you're saying. Like, that's gold. Like, if you want to have less violence, and have less risk of that, then don't try to be the person that's going to save everything. Your job is to de-escalate, not solve the problem. Wow, what a powerful message to leave with, Carol. How do our listeners learn more? You do keynotes in manufacturing, you do other help. How is best to follow you, start learning more from you, Carol?
Well, you can find me on LinkedIn. I'm sure that you'll post that information, that
Oh yeah.
contact information, so people can get it. I've just started a new monthly newsletter. I'm not doing it weekly. Can't keep up with that commitment. So just monthly. I just did my first one on mobbing. And mobbing, I'm seeing a lot of in manufacturing. So if you're not familiar with mobbing, if that's a new term, it's basically bullying on steroids. Then go have a look at the LinkedIn profile, and it's a quick read, 2-3 minutes. You'll be through it, but it will be very powerful and give you some good clues as to what to watch for. And my
Oh,
website, we'll make sure that that's posted so people can get a hold of me. And thank you, Trevor. I feel like we could keep on talking forever, but I know we have to close things out here.
But yeah, every time I talk to you, Carol, I learn. Thank you for helping manufacturing be a safer place and empowering leaders and all of us to know, when we know better, we do better. And so thank you for making us better and coming on the show, Carol.
I appreciate it, Trevor. Thank you. Have a wonderful day.
Hey, folks, appreciate you taking the time to join us today. If you enjoyed this episode, share it with someone. Haven't subscribed yet? Do it now. Remember, if you want results, the key is increasing your awareness of how you show up.